Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking on, well, maybe the biggest and smallest word in our language all at once, the verb to be.
It's everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
Right. I mean, think about it. You say things like, I was being sarcastic, or you'll be the team captain, or, the classic advice, just be yourself. We use it constantly.
And we almost never think about what we're actually communicating with it. Its utility is so immediate that the complexity is just completely hidden in plain sight.
And that's the thing. We use it for really two totally different jobs. Sometimes it's just stating a fact.
A static fact. The sky is blue. I am at home. It's an assertion of existence, a state of affairs.
Exactly. But then there's this other meaning, the one that's our whole mission for today's deep dive. We use it to talk about a process, a dynamic, an active, becoming.
A movement.
A movement. That's the perfect word for it. And what we want to understand is what we really mean when we talk about being something in that active sense.
It's a subtle, but I think a profound distinction.
It is, and the source material we're looking at today gave this just perfect anecdotal case to kick things off. It was about a friend who, after doing some specific activity, said, doing that, I finally felt myself to be Armenian.
And that's such a powerful phrase. It's so compelling because you have to assume this person was already Armenian.
Of course. By heritage, by nationality, by birth.
Yeah.
That was the established, the static fact of their life.
Right. The ontological fact. But the statement, I finally felt myself to do, implies something else entirely. It implies that the feeling of being, the engaged, active sense of it, had been missing.
It was dormant, maybe.
Dormant or just potential. And this one act, this one encounter triggered a revelation. It suggests a movement towards something that mere existence, just having the passport or the last name, didn't provide.
And that is the essential question for us right there. That's the deep dive. How do we draw a line between what we are, the established fact, and what we are being, this ongoing, active, and it seems intentional engagement with an identity?
So we're going to have to move past just, a history lesson on Heidegger and the battle of giants concerning being.
Right. We're not trying to solve all of ontology today.
No, not at all. We're focusing much more closely on what is being shown, what is being revealed, when a person uses that specific construction, I am being this. What are they trying to tell us about their state of mind, their practice, their consciousness right now?
Okay. So let's start by trying to untangle those two meanings. Substance versus process. Where do we even begin?
Well, to do this, we really do have to borrow from the masters. We have to go back. Okay. And Aristotle, thousands of years ago, he saw this exact same ambiguity.
It's not a new problem then.
Not in the slightest. He observed, and this is a paraphrase, that there are many senses in which a thing may be said to be, but all that is related to one central point.
Okay, let's unpack that. So everything that exists, everything we can say is something. It all somehow orbits a central idea. Is that the gist?
That's a great way to put it. It orbits a central essence. Whether you're talking about a table or the color red or an abstract concept like justice, they all get their sense of being from some kind of central unifying principle, even though they're all very different things.
I see. So it's not a chaotic mess of meanings. There's a structure to it.
There's a structure. And the key distinction he gives us, the tool we need for our discussion, is the one between substance, which is the essential static core of what a thing has to be itself, and a process toward substance.
Substance and process.
That's the pair. And that philosophical separation, that simple distinction, lets us analyze this human experience of being with so much more clarity.
Okay, let's try to apply that. Let's use a really common example. Say I get frustrated in traffic and I snap at someone, and later I say, sorry, I was being impatient just then.
Right.
In that moment, I haven't changed my fundamental substance, have I? I'm still me. My core self hasn't been rewritten.
Not at all.
But that state of being, the impatience, feels like it's in conflict. It's a temporary state that is clashing with my general belief about my substance, which is that I am a patient person.
That internal friction you're describing is the entire point. That's where the meaning is. The fact that your existence, your relatively stable personality, is completely distinct from the state of yourself being something in a particular moment.
So existence is the baseline. It's static.
And being is the dynamic overlay. It's the movement. It's really the difference between a noun and a verb. One just is, the other does.
And this gets us right to the central thesis of the work we're exploring. When we speak of being, and let's use the verbal quotes, being to keep it separate, we mean to show ourselves in a movement towards the essence of whatever follows.
A movement towards, yes. It's a directed movement. You could even call it teleological. It's aimed at a goal.
And the goal is the essence of the thing.
The goal is the essence of the predicate, exactly. So let's go back to sarcasm. If I say something and you take it literally, and then I have to say, no, I was being sarcastic.
Right.
What am I doing? I am performing an action. I am showing you a movement towards the real essence of my meaning, which was hidden from you. You missed it. My act of being is an attempt to reveal that concealed nature.
So it's like a course correction. You're saying, hey, you're looking at the surface, but the truth is over here. I'm actively trying to guide you toward the essence of what I meant.
Precisely. You're pulling it toward the light, as you said. And now think about the friend who felt himself to be Armenian.
Okay.
He wasn't achieving the substance of nationality in that moment. He already had that. He was achieving a feeling of movement, a feeling of moving towards an essence of being Armenian that was unlocked by a specific practice.
Oh, it's an internal coherence.
An internal coherence that is completely distinct from the simple factual statement, I am Armenian.
One is a line on a census form. The other is a lived, active experience. One is a report of a condition. The other is a belief about the nature of what you're doing.
And this is what's so interesting. For our purposes today, we don't actually need to define the absolute final essence of sarcasm or Armenianness. That's not the goal.
The affectation itself isn't the point.
No, the point is the process of being itself, the mechanism. How does a person endeavor to show something about an essence that they know isn't just their default static self?
So the whole investigation shifts. It's not about what things are, fundamentally. It's about how their nature is revealed to us through action.
Yes, and if we're talking about revelation, we have to talk about how this hidden essence even starts to become visible in the first place.
Okay, so if being is this active movement toward an essence, that raises a huge question. How do we even get a glimpse of that essence to begin with? It can't be immediate. I can't just, look at a classroom and instantly perceive the complete and total essence of teaching.
No, you can't. And the argument here is that claiming you could would be deeply problematic. If we said the essence of being Armenian was something anyone could just immediately grasp by, say, looking at a picture,
That would be incredibly reductive.
it would be reductive and, as the source puts it, chauvinistic. It assumes a complete, total knowledge that just isn't available to us. And, more importantly, it would shut down the whole process. If you already have the essence, there's no need for the journey, for the movement of being.
So if it's not immediate, it has to be revealed over time through some kind of process.
Exactly. And this process of revelation is called engagement.
Engagement.
Engagement is what happens when an encounter takes place. And an encounter is really just the meeting of things. It could be two people, a person and an object, an idea and a person, two chemicals and a beaker.
It's a point of contact.
It's the point of contact. And in that meeting, in that encounter, qualities that were previously hidden or just potential are disclosed. They come to presence. You get a hint, a glimpse of the underlying essence of the things that are meeting.
And this is a really important constraint you mentioned. We never see the whole essence at once. It's always partial.
It has to be partial. If we could grasp the entire essence of love or justice or even a table in one go, the pursuit would be over. The process of being would stop. The mystery is what drives the movement.
I think an analogy helps here. The source brings up a good one. Imagine two people encounter the exact same sculpture in a museum.
Okay.
One is an art historian. She sees the material, the chisel marks, the historical period, the artist's technique. Her encounter reveals one set of qualities.
Right, a technical historical essence.
But the other person is a child. The child sees a person, a story, a feeling. Maybe it looks like a monster or a hero. Their encounter is totally different. They leave with a completely different impression of the sculpture's essence.
And neither of them is wrong. The object itself contains the potential for both revelations. The nature of the engagement determines which facet of its essence is shown.
You mentioned this is non-anthropocentric. It's not just about human perception, which I think is a critical point to make this feel grounded in reality.
It is. Think about water. Water engaging with mercury reveals certain properties, density, surface tension. But water engaging with potassium,
You get a very different, very explosive reaction.
a very explosive reaction. The engagement with potassium reveals a completely different aspect of the fundamental essence of what water is and what it can do. The essence is manifold, and the encounter selects the disclosure.
So we are always dealing with partial knowledge. We can never know every possible way a thing could be presented to us.
We can't, and this is where the source nods to the philosopher Frege, who said of this kind of complete knowledge, dahin gelangen wir nie.
We never get there.
We never get there. And accepting that intellectual humility is what keeps the process of being in motion. It's what keeps us exploring and engaging.
And this engagement, it's not really a choice, is it? The source seems to argue that it's forced on us.
It is. You can't decide not to encounter something if it's present in your experience. If you walk into a room, you encounter the room. You can't will it away. The encounter demands a response.
And that response, that engagement, changes you. It's transformative.
Irrevocably so. You encounter a new food and discover you have a life-threatening allergy. Well, a fundamental aspect of your physical nature has just been revealed to you. You can't unknow that.
Or you get put into a leadership role at work for the first time. You are forced to adopt that role.
And in doing so, you are forced to engage with these huge social systems, authority, collaboration, responsibility. And that encounter might reveal something you never knew about yourself, maybe a hidden talent for leadership or a crippling fear of public speaking. Either way, you're changed.
Which brings us all back to defining being as this continuous creative process. It's not passive existence. It's something we are actively producing, bringing forth.
Yes, and the Greek term for this is so important here. The process is a poiesis, a poiesis.
Which means?
It means a creation, a production, a bringing forth. It's not just sitting there. It's the active, creative work of the self engaging with the world to disclose new realities. When we talk about being someone, we are talking about this poiesis that is constantly moving us toward an understanding of an essence we know we'll never fully capture.
So poiesis is the big picture, the grand project of creative self-disclosure. But that has to happen through concrete actions, right? It can't just be a feeling.
It can't just be a feeling, and that's the next crucial piece. That creation has to manifest through specific, tangible deeds.
Through practice.
Through practice.
Yeah.
The overarching poiesis of being something must be actualized through action. The condition of finding ourselves actively being something is the condition of practicing what we believe ourselves to be.
Okay, so now we have two Greek terms, poiesis and praxis.
And we need to keep them distinct because they really are the engine of this whole idea. Think of it this way. Poiesis is the whole project. It's the creation of the self, the bringing forth of a new reality, like an artist creating a sculpture. It's the overall endeavor.
And praxis.
Praxis is the specific action. It's the tapping of the chisel. It's the daily work, the individual steps, the actual movements you take to make that project real. It's within the state of practicing that we engage with and test the substance of what we are being.
That makes so much sense. So this grounds the whole concept in action. It confirms that existence is just the ticket to the game. It's the precondition, a lemma, as the source says.
A necessary precondition. You have to exist to be able to be something, of course. But simply existing is not being. We don't practice existing.
We practice being.
We practice being, and this reframes that classic philosophical question. When Hamlet asks, to be or not to be, he's asking about existence. Should I continue to exist or not?
It's an on-off switch for his substance.
Exactly. But if he had asked to be Hamlet, the avenging prince, or not to be that Hamlet, he would be questioning something else entirely.
He'd be questioning the endeavor, the praxis, the active struggle of living up to that role, of moving towards that essence.
That's the difference. And that ability to question, to reflect on the endeavor is what separates us. A dog exists. A rock exists. But we don't speak of a dog endeavoring to be a dog.
It lacks the cognitive toolkit for that. It can't question the essence of dogness or choose an alternative practice.
Right. The water engaging with the potassium doesn't endeavor to be water. It simply is. This capacity for self-reflection and choice is what defines the unique position of humanity.
It defines what the source calls the homo uns.
Yes, homons, which means, roughly, the human who is actively being. It's not just Homo sapiens, the one who knows. It's the human with cognition who not only exists, but knows she exists, and crucially, knows she has choices about what she will endeavor to be.
That awareness of choice is the spark.
It's the spark that makes the entire process of being possible. And to facilitate this practice, the Homo ens has to constantly shape the world. The analogy used is just beautiful.
The potter and the clay.
The potter and the clay. We take the indefinite, formless clay of the world, which is just raw existence, and we shape it. We create discrete, meaningful forms. This act of shaping, this poiesis, creates the structures and possibilities within which we can then practice being something.
And these structures, what are they?
We can call them spheres. This idea draws from the philosopher Peter Sloterdijk. Spheres are these spaces of human coexistence, like a family, a profession, a nation, that only get their form, their content, and their duration because we consciously inhabit them and practice within them.
Let's make that really concrete for the listener. Say I decide I want to be a marathon runner.
Okay.
I'm now engaging with several of these spheres at once. There's the physical sphere of my own body and its limits. There's the social sphere of the running community, which has its own language, its own rules, its own gear.
Its own rituals, even.
Right. And my praxis, the actual daily act of running, is what actualizes the potential that's suggested by the essence of marathon runner. I'm practicing within these spheres to move towards that essence.
Perfect example. And if you endeavor to be a good scientist, you are practicing within the sphere of the scientific method, of peer review, of institutional rules. Every single instance of being relies on engaging with these spheres that we have built. And this constant practice is what allows us, the homoons, to form a coherent sense of what's possible, which in turn informs what we choose to practice next.
So we are constantly building the stage on which we then perform our own identity.
That's a fantastic way to put it.
Okay, so if being is this active process of practice within these social spheres, we can finally talk about authenticity. This is a word that gets thrown around so much, usually as a kind of, simple moral compliment.
She's so authentic.
Right. But clearly, it's more complex here. We all intuitively understand advice like just be yourself. But what does that really mean if the self isn't a fixed point, but this ongoing process?
Well, under this framework, just be yourself is not a command to return to some static, unchangeable core. It's a command to align your current praxis, your actions, with your internal feeling of what your essence is.
So when I say, that wasn't me, after I do something I regret,
You're saying that your practice in that moment strayed from the essence you are endeavoring to be. Your action was dissonant with your internal sense of your own substance.
so authenticity is only possible for the homoenes. It's tied directly to that self-reflective capacity.
It has to be. Only a being that possesses a concept of ontology, that can ask, what does it mean to be, can experience a mismatch between its actions and its essence.
This is that line between the ontic and the ontological again.
Exactly. Animals and machines live in the ontic world, the world of facts, of what is. A security camera perceives the facts of a room, but it has no ontological capacity. It cannot question the meaning of its existence. You can't ask a calculator if it is authentically solving an equation. It just is. Therefore, only homoenes can be inauthentic.
Okay, and this leads to what I think is the most challenging and maybe the most important argument in the source material. Authenticity is not a normative ethical statement.
It has no moral quality.
It is not a judgment of right or wrong.
This is so critical to get right. We have to decouple authenticity from morality. Calling a practice inauthentic is not the same as calling it bad or evil. It is simply a description of the relationship between a subject's internal feeling and their external action.
Can you give us a really clear example of this kind of non-moral inauthenticity?
The clearest example is a professional actor. An actor's entire job is to practice being something they are not.
To be professionally inauthentic.
Precisely. They are engaged in the praxis of being a grieving king or a joyful lover, even when their internal state is, tired and they're thinking about what to have for dinner. It's a highly skilled, intentional, and completely non-moral form of inauthenticity performed for an artistic purpose.
Or a spy.
A spy is another perfect example. They intentionally practice inauthenticity as the very core of their mission. But you could say they are being authentic to their mission by being inauthentic to their cover identity.
So authenticity is just a measure of alignment. Authenticity shows consistency between feeling and action. Inauthenticity shows dissonance. You always are who you are, but you can feel that what you are being in a given moment is not a true expression of that.
Yes. And from that definition flows the next logical step. Authenticity must be a purely internal experience.
It's private.
It is a private sense of self-coherence. It connects your personal feeling of being to your practice. No one else can feel it for you.
This has huge implications for how we judge other people. Because if it's internal, then we are completely 100% incapable of judging the authenticity of others.
We can judge their actions. We can judge their praxis. But we cannot judge the quality of their being.
Because if we could, deceit would be impossible.
It would be impossible. The moment someone started to lie, we would perceive the inauthenticity. The lie would fail before it was even finished. We only know a person is being authentic because they tell us they are, or because their actions over a long period of time are so consistent that we build a model of them that feels authentic.
Which means we really need to stop using authenticity as a weapon against each other.
Yeah.
When you hear people making these grand rhetorical claims like, a true American would never do X.
That's a categorical error.
A huge one.
They are collapsing the internal quality of feeling into the external public act. The act itself, waving a flag, singing an anthem, whatever the practice is, has no inherent authenticity. The authenticity belongs only to the person feeling themselves to be that way while they do it.
You can't impose a definition of authenticity onto someone else's practice. That's just dogmatism.
It is, but, and this is a big but, even though the experience is internal, it's only made necessary by the external world.
Ah, okay. So it's private, but it only exists because we are public.
Exactly. It exists only because we are in these relations of human coexistence. The social spheres we live in only function because we proceed with a methodological assumption of authenticity in others.
We have to assume the doctor is authentically trying to heal, and the bus driver is authentically trying to drive the route.
We have to. That assumption is the grease in the gears of society. And ironically, that very assumption is what makes deceit and betrayal possible. It's the vulnerability we accept to live together.
And without that social context, the whole question of being just evaporates.
It vanishes. If you were the last person on Earth, the need to express what you feel yourself to be, a leader, a friend, an artist, disappears. You would just exist. It is the presence of others and the possibilities they create that fuels this whole engine of active being.
So this connects directly to the idea of belonging. That desire to feel a movement towards an essence is so often a desire for integration, for a place within a group.
It is. When someone asks themselves, am I really a part of this community if I don't agree with them on this issue? They're really asking if their current praxis is aligning with what they perceive as the core essence required for authentic belonging.
And the easy but wrong answer is always to just point to a checklist.
Mm-hmm.
If you perform these rituals, if you hold this membership card, if you show up to the meetings, then you belong. You are a member.
But our analysis shows why that's not enough. That reduces the complex internal process of being to a set of social metrics. You can't just set an arbitrary bar and say, once you've done these 5 things, you will now feel yourself to be a true member.
Because the external practices, the rituals, the legal statuses, they are the structures, the spheres. But they are not the experience.
They are not the experience of being. They are necessary, but not sufficient.
So how do these two parts, the internal feeling and the external structure, actually interact?
The social structure is what brings coherence and meaning to the internal feeling. My private feeling that I am, say, a teacher, is only meaningful because the social sphere has already created a shared understanding of what a teacher is. There are roles, institutions, a language for it.
The structure provides the vocabulary for my feeling.
A vocabulary and a stage. And this gives us a really powerful way to understand acts of negation. If I stand up and declare I will not be a soldier, that statement has profound meaning only in a society that understands the essence and practice of being a soldier. My negation is an act of choice in relation to that sphere.
It reveals something about my practice.
It reveals a great deal. But if I declare I will not be a citizen of Jupiter, what have I revealed?
Nothing. It's a meaningless statement, a tautology.
It's a tautology of definition because there's no sphere, no possibility of practice for me to negate. Meaning requires contrast. It requires the possibility of being something else.
And this tension, this idea that we're always moving toward an essence we can never fully grasp, this is what creates so much identity conflict within communities, isn't it?
Absolutely. Because it is impossible to exhaust the meaning of being French or being a scientist or being a Muslim, it is therefore impossible to point to one single practice and say, this and only this is what makes a true practitioner.
And that's the source of that friction between, say, the legal status of being a citizen of a country and the personal felt experience of being culturally a part of it. The legal system wants a fixed, objective substance. The person is chasing a dynamic, subjective essence.
And if that essence is inexhaustible, if there's no final recipe, then the burden of meaning falls on the individual. Meaning isn't just sitting there in the symbol or the ritual. It has to be created in the engagement between your feeling of being and those social roles.
So the sense of what I mean when I feel myself to be authentically Christian or authentically a part of my family is a sense I have to create for myself.
You have to create it for yourself. The friend who felt himself to be Armenian, he wasn't just following a cultural script. He was using that script, that practice, as the raw material for his own act of self-creation. He was defining what that essence meant for him in that moment.
This has to have major implications for any field that studies humans, specifically anthropology. Their entire subject is human practice.
It is. If an anthropologist is studying a culture, they are studying these spheres of practice, and so they are constantly, whether they admit it or not, wrestling with this question of their subject's authenticity.
How so?
Well, when they're in the field, they're observing a culture's praxis and trying to interpret the symbols they encounter to avoid their work being just a travel diary, just their own subjective impressions.
Yeah.
To avoid it being just memoir, they have to proceed with the methodological necessity of assuming that their subjects are revealing an authentic expression of their being.
They have to assume the rituals they're seeing are meaningful to the people performing them.
Yes. The big controversies in anthropology, like the ones around Margaret Mead's work in Samoa, they often boil down to this very question. Were her subjects revealing an authentic cultural practice? Or were they, just messing with the researcher and telling her what they thought she wanted to hear? The interpretation of the data depends entirely on that assumption of authenticity.
So assuming authenticity is the key that lets the anthropologist try to step outside their own biases and treat the practice as genuinely meaningful.
It is the only way to transcend their own dogmatic prejudices.
Okay, so if we take this all the way, if the key difference between Homo ons and everything else is this capacity to practice being something, then anthropology is the study of what Homo ons reveals through this constant process.
That's what it has to be. Anthropology defines itself as the study of man's nature, attempting to enclose his essence through these glimpses we've been talking about.
So the big fights in the field, the theoretical disagreements, they're not just about data. They're disagreements about how to interpret what Homo is revealing about itself through these constantly changing spheres of practice that we call culture.
Right. And this gives the anthropologist an almost terrifying amount of power, because they're the ones who define canonicity.
What do you mean by canonicity?
Through their observation and interpretation, they decide which practices belong to a sphere of being and which are just, noise. They decide what gets written down in the ethnography as the definitive canonical expression of that culture.
So deciding that a specific folk dance is canonically Armenian, but deciding that the way young people in Yerevan use smartphones is not.
Exactly. And that act of defining what belongs to the essence of a culture is not a neutral academic exercise.
Oh, it has huge real-world consequences.
Immense political and social weight. The source brings up the example of an anthropologist defining, or not defining, modern practices around LGBT identity as canonically part of a culture. That definition, once published, enters the public sphere and directly influences the internal arguments within that culture over what the essence of their own identity should be.
Given that kind of influence, I can see why a lot of modern anthropologists are very hesitant to even use the word essence.
There's a deep reluctance. They worry that trying to define the essence of a religion or a culture forces them into making subjective judgments, and their work just becomes memoir instead of science.
So they prefer to stick to interpreting symbols and beliefs, but always with this qualifier that they could never be certain about the underlying essence.
It feels safer, it feels more methodologically humble, but it creates a massive structural paradox at the heart of the discipline.
Which is what?
The paradox is this. If the anthropologist completely refuses to speak of a human essence, on what grounds does their interpretation have any authority? If there's no essential truth they're trying to get closer to, then their interpretation risks collapsing into just another subjective story. Why is their memoir more valid than anyone else's?
So they're caught. The very structure of science, in any field, is about connecting the particular observation to a universal law.
Yes, science finds its authority by invoking the particular towards the universal. It aims towards an essence, a fundamental particle, a law of gravity, that it feels it gets closer to through abstraction and formalization. If anthropology, as a science of humanity, rejects the very premise of a human essence, what is its universal? What is its basis for authority?
Without that, it really does risk becoming just a collection of authorized stories. If the goal isn't to try and pin down the essential nature of Homo ons, even knowing you'll never fully succeed, what's the point of the science?
It's the most difficult science because its subject, Homo ons, is a moving target. It is constantly redefining its own essence through practice. The data is always changing because the object of study is actively changing itself.
So the ultimate choice for the field is a philosophical one. Either you embrace the difficult, maybe impossible pursuit of that elusive human essence, using every glimpse to refine the definition.
Or you step back and say the object of study is only the ever-changing subjective story of human coexistence. The entire future of what it means to study humanity really hinges on how we understand this active, messy, beautiful process of being.
Wow. Okay, so this has been a huge journey. We've gone from a simple, everyday verb to the very foundation of identity and what it means to be a science of the human. Let's try to recap. This whole deep dive was based on untangling two questions. What are we, our static existence, and what are we being, our dynamic process?
And we found that this dynamic process, this being, depends on engagement. It's the necessary encounter with the world that reveals glimpses of a concealed essence.
And we defined practice, the Greek praxis, as the specific daily actions that make up the larger creative process, the poiesis, by which we, as homoans, try to define ourselves.
We also reframed authenticity. It's not a moral good. It's an internal, private quality of practice that we can't judge in others. And we saw that this private feeling is only made possible and meaningful within the shared social spheres of coexistence. It's what gives us a sense of belonging.
Right, and this whole complex framework leaves us, and you, the listener, with some really profound questions to chew on. These aren't questions with easy answers.
No, they're questions that really demand a lifetime of practice to even begin to answer.
So first, let's think about the question of origin. If we agree that the essence of what we're trying to be is this inexhaustible thing that we can only glimpse, then where do we get the first idea? How do we learn the vocabulary of what we can even try to denote ourselves as being? Where does that first seed of a potential essence come from?
And following that, there's the question of rigor. This is for anyone who thinks about the human sciences. If a field like anthropology wants to be a rigorous science on par with physics, which describes the fundamental essence of particles, can it ever succeed without the premise of a shared universal human essence? And if it rejects that premise, what is its atomic fact? What is the single foundational unit of human experience that it is trying to approach? What gives its interpretations authority, if not this dynamic universal question of what we mean when we are actively being something?
These questions really force you to look at your own life, your own daily practices, not just as habits, but as ongoing acts of philosophical choice and self-creation. A fascinating and slightly daunting thought to end on.
It is. The work is never done.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the constant movement of existence and identity. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.